Today's video is sponsored by Rose Forever. Rose Forever is a New York-based brand that designs luxurious rose boxes with natural roses that last for a year as if freshly picked. They use all natural oils to preserve the roses, and all the materials used on the box is vegan. Along with that, their roses are allergen-free, so if you love flowers but can't be around them due to your allergies, Rose Forever is perfect for you. Right now, they're having a huge Christmas sale, and these bouquets would be the perfect gift to put under your Christmas tree. Everyone would love to have one of these stunning and luxurious bouquets for Christmas. On top of that sale, you can use my code CLOUD25 for $25 off of your purchase. The link will be at the top of the description, and thank you to Rose Forever. I hope you all enjoy. Oh, hello, dear. Did you wake from your slumber? Are you feeling all right? You seem a bit shaken up. It's okay. There. That's all right. Well, I know bad dreams. Bad dreams are just that. Only a dream, all right? Well, did you want me to help you relax and get back to sleep? I can help you with that, of course. I have this cozy candle that we can light. And I'm sure the scent will instantly calm your nerves, alright? Let's go ahead and light it. Did you want to take a sniff first? Here we go. Just go ahead and light. Yes, just go ahead and feel the warmth of the candle against your face, okay? I want you to take a moment and just focus on the light. Focus on the smell that's surrounding you, that pleasant and comforting scent, okay? Just listen. I'm gonna go ahead and just place this back here for us. Did you maybe want some warm milk or maybe even some hot cocoa? I can go ahead and heat that up for you right now. Yeah, of course. I'll be right back, okay? Here you are. So did you want to maybe take a sip? How is that? Is it too hot? Okay, perfect. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and put this next to you so you can take some sips whenever you'd like, okay? Perfect. Now, how's that? How are you feeling now? Got your mind off of that nightmare yet? Well, how about we go ahead and just take some calming and deep breaths with each other? Yeah, we'll just take a few, okay? So let's go ahead and inhale and exhale. Let's go ahead and inhale and exhale. Another one, inhale and exhale. Perfect. You're doing so well. Let's take another breath. Inhale Now, how about we get you tucked back in and comfortable, and maybe I could read you my book so you could fall asleep. Yeah, I've been actually meaning to reread this book, Little House on the Prairie. Have you ever read it before? I used to read this book so much when I was younger, so I thought we could revisit it. How does that sound? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get you all comfortable. Okay, comfortable and cozy. This book is so old, as you can see all the wear and tear with the binding, but I really love this book. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 1, Going West. A long time ago, when all the grandfathers and grandmothers of today were little boys and little girls, or very small babies, or perhaps not even born, Pa and Ma and Mary and Lauren and baby Carrie left their little house in the big woods of Wisconsin. They drove away and left it lonely and empty in the clearing among the big trees, and they never saw that little house again. They were going into the Indian community. Pa said there were too many people in the big woods now. Quite often, Laurel heard the ringing thud of an axe, which was not Pa's axe, or the echo of a shot that did not come from his gun. The path that went by the little house had become a road, and almost every day Laura and Mary stopped their playing and stared in surprise at a wagon slowly creaking by on that road. Wild animals would not stay in a country where there were so many people, and Pa did not like to stay either. He liked a country where the wild animals lived without being afraid. He liked to see the little fawn and their mothers looking at him from the shadowy woods, and the fat, lazy bears eating berries in the wild berry patches. In the long winter evenings, he talked to Ma about the western country. In the west, the land was level and there were no trees. The grass grew thick and high. There the wild animals wandered and fed as though they were in a pasture that stretched much farther than a man could see. And there were no settlers. Only Indians lived there. One day, in the very last of the winter, Pa said to Ma, "Seeing you don't object, I've decided to go see the West. I've had an offer for this place, and we can sell it now for as much as we're ever likely to get, enough to give us a start in a new country." "Oh, Charles, must we go now?" Ma said. The weather was so cold, and the snug house was so comfortable. "If we are going this year, we must go now," said Pa. "We can't get across the Mississippi after the ice breaks." So Pa sold the little house. He sold the cow and the calf. He made hickory bows and fastened them upright to the wagon box. And Ma helped him stretch white canvas over them. In the thin dark before morning, Ma gently shook Mary and Laura till they got up. In firelight and candlelight, she washed and combed them and dressed them warmly. Over their long red flannel underwear she put wool petticoats and wool dresses and long wool stockings. She put their coats on them and their rabbit-skin hood and their red yarn mittens. Everything from that little house was in the wagon, except the beds and tables and chairs. They did not need to take those because Pa could always make new ones. There was thin snow on the ground. The air was still and cold and dark. The bare trees stood up against the frosty stars. But in the east, the sky was pale, and through the gray woods came lanterns with wagons and horses, bringing Grandpa and Grandma and aunts and uncles and cousins. Mary and Lauren clung tight to their rag dolls and did not say anything. The cousins stood around and looked at them. Grandma and all the aunts hugged and kissed them and hugged and kissed them again, saying goodbye. Pa hung his gun to the wagon bows inside the canvas top, where he could reach it quickly from the seat. He hung his bullet pouch and powder horn beneath it. He laid the fiddle box carefully between pillows, where jolting would not hurt the fiddle. The uncles helped him hitch the horses to the wagon. All the cousins were told to kiss Mary and Lauren, so they did. Pa picked up Mary and then Lauren and set them on the bed in the back of the wagon. He helped Ma climb up to the wagon seat, and Grandma reached up and gave her baby Carrie. Pa swung up and sat beside Ma. And Jack, the brindle bulldog, went under the wagon. So they all went away from the little log house. The shutters were over the windows, so the little house could not see them go. It stayed there inside the log fence behind the 2 big oak trees that in the summertime had made green roofs for Mary and Laura to play under. And that was the last of the little house. They drove a long way through the snowy woods till they came to the town of Pepin. Mary and Laura had seen it once before, but it looked different now. The door of the store and the doors of all the houses were shut. The stumps were covered with snow, and no little children were playing outdoors. Big cords of wood stood among the stumps. Only 2 or 3 men in boots and fur caps and bright plaid coats were to be seen. Ma and Lauren and Mary ate bread and molasses in the wagon, and the horses ate corn from nose bags, while inside the store, Pa traded his furs for things they would need on the journey. They could not stay long in the town because they must cross the lake that day. The enormous lake stretched flat and smooth and white all the way to the edge of the gray sky. Wagon trucks went way across it, so far that you could not see where they went, and they ended in nothing at all. Pa drove the wagon out of the ice, following those wagon tracks. The horses' hooves clopped with a dull sound. The wagon wheels went crunching. The town grew smaller and smaller behind, till even the tall store was nothing, only a dot. All around the wagon there was nothing but empty and silent space. Laura didn't like it, but Pa was on the wagon seat and Jack was under the wagon. She knew that nothing could hurt her while Pa and Jack were there. And at last the wagon was pulling up a slope of earth again, and again there were trees. There was a little log house, too, among the trees, so Laura felt better. Nobody lived in the little house. It was a place to camp in. It was a tiny house and strange, with a big fireplace and rough bunks against the wall. But it was warm when Pa had built a fire in the fireplace. That night Mary and Laura and baby Carrie slept with Ma in a bed made on the floor before the fire, while Pa slept outside in the wagon to guard it and the horses. In the night, a strange noise wakened Laura. It sounded like a shot, but it was sharper and longer than a shot. Again and again she heard it. Mary and Carrie were asleep, but Laura couldn't sleep until Ma's voice came slowly through the dark. "Go to sleep, Laura," Ma said. "It's only the ice cracking." Next morning, Pa said, "It's lucky we crossed yesterday, Caroline. Wouldn't wonder if the ice broke up today. We made a late crossing, and we're lucky it didn't start breaking up while we were out in the middle of it." "I thought about that yesterday, Charles," Ma replied gently. Laura hadn't thought about it before, but now she thought, what would have happened if the ice had cracked under the wagon wheels and they had all gone down into the cold water in the middle of that vast lake. "You're frightening somebody, Charles," Ma said, and Pa caught Laura up in his big, safe hug. "We're across the Mississippi," he said, hugging her joyously. "How do you like that little half pint of sweet cider half drunk up?" Laura said she liked it, and she asked if they were in the Indian country now, but they were not. They were in Minnesota. It was a long, long way to Indian Territory. Almost every day the horses traveled as far as they could, and almost every night Pa and Ma made camp in a new place. Sometimes they had to stay several days in one camp because a creek was in flood and they couldn't cross it till the waters went down. They crossed too many creeks to count. They saw strange woods and hills and stranger country with no trees. They drove across rivers on long wooden bridges, and they came to one wide yellow river that had no bridge. That was the Missouri River. Pa drove onto a raft, and they all sat still in the wagon while the raft went swaying away from the safe land and slowly crossing all that rolling, muddy yellow water. After more days, they came to the hills again. In a valley, the wagon struck fast in the deep black mud. Rain poured down and thunder crashed and lightning flared. There was no place to make camp and build a fire. Everything was damp and chill and miserable in the wagon, but they had to stay in it and eat cold bits of food. The next day, Pa found a place on a hillside where they could camp. The rain had stopped, but they had to wait a week before the creek went down and the mud dried so that Pa could dig the wagon wheels out of it and go on. One day, while they were waiting, a tall, lean man came out of the woods riding a black pony. He and Pa talked a while, then they went off into the woods together, and when they came back, both of them were riding black ponies. Pa had traded the tired brown horse for those ponies. They were beautiful little horses, and Pa said they were not really ponies, they were Western Mustangs. They're strong as mules and as gentle as kittens, Pa said. They had large, soft, gentle eyes and long manes and tails, and slender legs and feet much smaller and quicker than the feet of horses in the big woods. When Laurel asked what their names were, Pa said that she and Mary could name them. So Mary named one Pet, and Laura named the other Patty. when the creek's roar was not so loud and the road was drier, Pa dug up the wagon out of the mud, and he hitched Pet and Patty to it, so they were all went on together. They had come in the covered wagon all the long way from the big woods of Wisconsin, across Minnesota and Iowa and Missouri. All that long way Jack had trotted under the wagon. Now they set out to go across Kansas. Kansas was endless flat land, covered with tall grass blowing in the wind. Day after day they traveled in Kansas, and saw nothing but the rippling grass and the enormous sky. In a perfect circle, the sky circled down to the level land, and the wagon was in the circle's exact middle. All day long, Bet and Patty went forward, trotting and walking and trotting again, but they couldn't get out of the middle of that circle. When the sun went down, the circle was still around them, and the edge of the sky was pink. Then slowly the land became black. The wind made a lonely sound in the grass. The campfire was small and lost in so much space. But large stars hung from the sky, glittering so near that Laurel felt she could almost touch them. The next day the land was the same, the sky was the same, the circle did not change. Laura and Mary were tired of them all. There was nothing new to do and nothing new to look at. The bed was made in the back of the wagon and neatly covered with a gray blanket. Laura and Mary sat on it. The canvas sides of the wagon top were rolled up and tied so that the prairie wind blew in. It whipped Laura's straight brown hair and Mary's golden curls every which way, and the strong light screwed up their eyelids. Sometimes a big jackrabbit bounded in big bounds away from the blowing grass. Jack paid no attention. Poor Jack was tired too, and his paws were sore from traveling so far. The wagon kept on jolting. The canvas top snapped in the wind. 2 faint wheel tracks kept going away behind the wagon, always the same. Pa's back was hunched. The reins were loose in his hands, and the wind blew his long brown beard. Moss sat straight and quiet, her hands folded in her lap. Baby Carrie slept in a nest among the soft bundles. Oh, wow. Mary yawned and Laura said, "Ma, can't we get out and run behind the wagon? My legs are so tired." "No, Laura," Ma said. "Aren't we going to camp pretty soon?" Laura asked. It seemed such a long time since noon, when they had eaten their lunch sitting on the green grass in the shade of the wagon. Pa answered, "Not yet. It's too early to camp now." "I want to camp now. I'm so tired," Laura said. Then Ma said Laura. That was all, but it meant that Laura must not complain. So she did not complain any more aloud, but she was still naughty inside. She sat and thought complaints to herself. Her legs ached, and the wind wouldn't stop blowing her hair. The grass waved and the wagon jolted, and nothing else happened for a long time. "We're coming to a creek or a river," Pa said. "Girls, can you look? Can you see those trees ahead?" Laura stood up and held to one of the wagon's bows. Far ahead she saw a low, dark smudge. "That's trees," Pa said. "You can tell by the shape of the shadows, In this country's trees means water, and that is where we'll camp tonight. Chapter 2, Crossing the Creek. Pets and Patty began to trot briskly as if they were glad to, and Laura held tight to the wagon and bow and stood up in the jolting wagon. Beyond Pa's shoulders and far across the waves of green grass, she could see the trees, and they were not like any other trees she had seen before. They were no taller than bushes. "Whoa," said Pa suddenly. "Now which way?" he muttered to himself. The road divided here, and you could not tell which was the more traveled way. Both of them were faint wheel tracks in the grass. One went towards the west, and the other sloped downward a little towards the south. Both soon vanished in the tall, blowing grass. "Better go downhill, I guess," Pa decided. "The creeks down in the bottoms must be this way to the ford." He turned Pet and Patty towards the south. The road went down and up again, over gently curving land. The trees were nearer now, but they were no taller. Then Laura gasped and clutched the wagon bow, for almost under Pet's and Patty's noses there was no more blowing grass. There was no land at all. She looked beyond the edge of land and across the tops of trees. The road turned there. For a little way it went across the cliff's top, then went sharply downhill. Pa put on the brakes. Pet and Patty braced themselves backwards and almost sat down. The wagon wheels slid onward, little by little, lowering the wagon further down the steep slope into the ground. Jagged cliffs of bare red earth rose up on both sides of the wagon. Grass waved along their tops, but nothing grew on their seamed straight up and down sides. They were hot, and heat came from them against Laura's face. The wind was still blowing overhead, but it did not blow down into this deep crack in the ground. The stillness seemed strange and empty. Then once more the wagon was level. The narrow crack down which it had come open into the bottom lands. Here grew the tall trees whose tops Laura had seen from the prairie above. Shady groves were scattered on the rolling meadows, and in the groves deers were lying down, hardly to be seen among the shadows. The deer turned their heads toward the wagon, and curious fawns stood up to see it more clearly. Laura was surprised because she did not see the creek, but the bottom lands were wide. Down here, below the prairie, there were gentle hills and open sunny places. There was still and hot. Under the wagon wheels, the ground was soft. In the sunny open spaces, the grass grew thin, and deer had cropped it short. And for a while, the high, bare cliffs of red earth stood up behind the wagon, but they were almost hidden behind hills and trees when Pat and Patty stopped to drink from the creek. The rushing sound of the water filled the still air all along the creek banks. The trees hung over it and made it dark with shadows. In the middle it ran swiftly, sparkling silver and blue. "This creek's pretty high," Pa said, "but I guess we can make it all right. You can see this is a ford by the old wheel's ruts." "What do you say, Caroline?" "Whatever you say, Charles," Ma answered. Pets and Patty lifted their wet noses. They pricked their ears forward looking at the creek. Then they pricked them back to hear what Pa would say. They sighed and laid their soft noses together to whisper to each other. A little way upstream, Jack was lapping the water with his red tongue. "I'll tie down the wagon cover," Pa said. He climbed down from the seat and unrolled the canvas sides and tied them firmly to the wagon box. Then he pulled the rope at the back so that the canvas puckered together in the middle, leaving only a tiny round hole too small to see through. Mary huddled down on the bed. She did not like fords. She was afraid of the rushing waters. But Laura was excited. She liked the splashing. Pa climbed to the seat, saying, "They may have to swim out there in the middle, but we'll make it all right, Caroline." Lauren thought of Jack and said, "I wish Jack could ride in the wagon, Pa." Pa did not answer. He gathered the reins tightly in his hands. Ma said, "Jack can swim, Laura. He'll be all right." The wagon went forward softly in the mud. Water began to splash against the wheels. The splashing grew louder, and the wagon shook as the noisy water struck at it. Then all at once the water lifted and balanced and swayed. It was a lovely feeling. The noise stopped and Ma said sharply, "Lie down, girls." Quick as a flash, Mary and Lauren dropped flat on the bed. When Ma spoke like that, they did as they were told. Ma's arm pulled a smothering blanket over them, heads and all. "Be still, just as you are. Don't move," she said. Mary did not move, but was trembling still. Laura could not help wiggling a little bit. She did so want to see what was happening. She could feel the wagon swaying and turning. The splashing was noisy again, and again it died away. Then Pa's voice frightened Laura. It said, "Take them, Caroline." The wagon lurched. Then there was suddenly a heavy splash besides it. Laura sat straight up and clawed the blankets from her head. Pa was gone. Ma sat alone, holding tight to the reins with both hands. Mary hid her face in the blankets again, but Laura rose up farther. She couldn't see the creek bank. She couldn't see anything in the front of the wagon but the water rushing at it. And in the water, 3 heads, Pet's head and Patty's head, and Pa's small wet head. Pa's fist in the water was holding tight to Pet's bridle. Laura could faintly hear Pa's voice through the rushing of the water. It sounded calm and cheerful, but she couldn't hear what he said. He was talking to the horse. Ma's face was white and scared. "Lie down, Laura," Ma said. Laura lay down. She felt cold and sick. Her eyes were shut tight, but she could still see the terrible water and Pa's brown beard drowning in it. For a long time, the wagon swayed and swung, and Mary cried without making a sound. Laura's stomach felt sicker and sicker. Then the front wheels struck and grated, and Pa shouted. The whole wagon jerked and jolted and tipped backwards, but the wheels were turning on the ground. Laura was up again, holding to the seat. She saw Pet's and Patty's scrambling wetbacks, climbing a steep bank. Pa running beside them, shouting, "Hi, Patty, hi, Pet, get up, get up. Whoopsie daisies, good girls." At the top of the bank, they stood still, panting and dripping. The wagon stood still, safely out of the creek. Pa panted and dripped too, and Ma said, "Oh, Charles." There, Caroline," Pa said. "We're all safe, thanks to a good, tight wagon box, well fastened to the running gear. I never saw a creek rise so fast in my life, but Pet and Patty are good swimmers, but I guess they wouldn't have made it if I hadn't helped them. If Pa had not known what to do, or if Ma had been too frightened to drive, or if Laura and Mary had been naughty and bothered her, they would have all been lost. The river would have rolled them over and over and carried them and drowned them, and no one would have ever known what became of them. For weeks, perhaps, no other person would come along that road." "Well," said Pa, "all's well that ends well," said Ma, and Ma said, "Charles, you're wet to the skin." Before Pa could answer, Laurel cried, "Oh, where's Jack?" They had forgotten about Jack. They had left him on the other side of the dreadful water, and now they could not see him anywhere. He must have tried to swim after them, but they could not see him struggling in the water now. Laura swallowed hard to keep from crying. She knew it was shameful to cry, but there was crying inside of her. All the long way from Wisconsin, poor Jack had followed them so patiently and faithful, and now they had left him to drown. He was so tired, and they might have taken him into the wagon. He had stood on the bank and seen the wagon going away from him as if they didn't care for him at all, and he would never known how much they wanted him. Pa said he wouldn't have done such a thing to Jack, not for $1 million. If he had known how that creek would have rised when they were in the midstream, he would have never let Jack try to swim it. "But that can't be helped now," he said. He went far up and down the creek bank looking for Jack, calling him and whistling for him. But it was no use. Jack was gone. I didn't mean to be hit with that scene. I wasn't ready for that, honestly. Okay. R.I.P. Jack. Okay. At last, there was nothing to do but to go on. Pet and Patty were rested. Pa's clothes had dried on him while he searched for Jack. He took the reins again and drove uphill, out of the river's bottom. Laura looked back all the way. She knew she wouldn't see Jack again, but she wanted to. She couldn't see anything but low curves of land coming between the wagon and the creek, and beyond the creek, those strange cliffs of red earth rose up again. Then other bluffs just like them stood up in the front of the wagon. Faint wheels tracks went into the cracks between the earthen walls. Bets and Patty climbed till the crack became a small grassy valley, and the valley widened out to the high prairie once more. No road, not even the faintest trace of wheels or of a rider passing, could be seen anywhere. The prairie looked as if no human eye had ever seen it before. Only the tall wild grass covered that endless empty land, and a great empty sky arched over it. Far away from the sun's edge touched the rim of the earth. The sun was enormous, and it was throbbing and pulsing with light. All around the sky's edge ran a pale pink glow, and above the pink was yellow, and above that was blue. Above the blue sky was no color at all. Purple shadows were gathering over the land, and the wind was mourning. Pa stopped the Mustangs. He and Ma got out of the wagon to make camp, and Mary and Laura climbed down to the ground too. "Oh, Ma," Laura begged. "Jack has gone to heaven, hasn't he? He was such a good dog. Can't he go to heaven? Ma didn't know what to answer, but Pa said, "Yes, Laura, he can. God that doesn't forget the sparrows won't leave a good dog like Jack out in the cold." Laura felt only a little better. She was not happy. Pa did not whistle about his work as usual, and after a while he said, "And what we'll do in a wild country without a good watchdog, I don't know." Chapter 3. Camp on the High Prairie. Pa made camp as usual. First he unhitched and unharnessed Pet and Patty, and he put them on their picket lines. Picket lines were long ropes fastened to iron pegs driven into the ground. The pegs were called picket pins. When horses were on picket lines, they could eat all the grass that the long ropes would let them reach, but when Pet and Patty were put on them, the first thing they did was lie down and roll back and forth and over. They rolled till the feeling of the harness was all gone from their backs. And while Pet and Patty were rolling, Pa pulled all the grass from a large round space of the ground. There was old dead grass at the roots of the green grass, and Pa would take no chance of setting the prairie on fire. If a fire once started in that dry undergrass, it would sweep the whole country bare and black. Pa said, "Better be on the safe side. It saves trouble in the end." And when the space was clear of grass, Pa laid a small handful of dry grass in its center. From the creek bottoms he brought an armful of twigs and dead wood. He laid small twigs and larger twigs, and then the wood on the handful of dry grass, and he lighted the grass. The fire crackled merrily inside the ring of bare ground that couldn't get out of it. Then Pa brought water from the creek while Mary and Laura helped Ma get supper. Ma measured coffee beans into the coffee mill, and Mary ground them. Laura filled the coffee pot with water Pa brought, and Ma set the pot in the coals, while she set iron bake oven in the coals too. When it heated, she mixed cornmeal and salt with water and patted it into little cakes. She greased the bake oven with a pork rind and laid the cornmeal cakes in it and put on its iron cover. Then Pa raked some more coals over the cover, while Ma sliced fat, salted pork. She fried the slices in the iron spider. The spider had short legs to stand on in the coals, and that was why it was called a spider. If it had no legs, it would have just been only a frying pan. The coffee boiled and the cakes baked, the meat fried, and they all smelled so good that Laura grew hungrier and hungrier. Pa set the wagon near the fire. He and Ma sat on it. Mary and Laura sat on the wagon's tongue. Each of them had a tin plate and a steel knife, a steel fork with white bone handles. Ma had a tin cup, and Pa had a tin cup, and baby Mary had a little one all on her own. But Mary and Laura had to share their tin cup. They drank water, as they could not drink coffee until they grew up. While they were eating supper, the purple shadow closed around the campfire. The vast prairie was dark and still. Only the wind moved stealthily through the grass, and the large, low skies hung glittering from the great sky. The campfire was cozy in the big, chill darkness, and the slices of pork were crisp and fat. The corn cakes were good. In the dark beyond the wagon, Pets and Patty were eating too. They bit off bites of grass with sharply crunching sounds. "We'll camp here a day or two," said Pa. "Maybe we'll stay here. There's good land, timber in the bottoms, plenty of game, everything a man could want." "What do you say, Caroline? We might go farther and fare worse," Ma replied. "Anyways, I'll take a look around tomorrow," Pa said. "I'll take my gun and get us some good fresh meat." He lit his pipe with a hot coal and stretched his legs comfortably. The warm brown smell of tobacco smoke mixed with the warmth of the fire. Mary yawned and slid off the wagon tongue to sit on the grass, and Laura yawned too. Ma quickly washed the tin plates, the tin cups, the knives and forks. She washed the bake oven and the spider, and rinsed the dishcloth. For an instant she was still, listening to the long wailing howl from the dark prairie. They all knew what it was, but that sound always ran cold up Laura's backbone and crinkled over the back of her head. Ma shook the dishcloth, and then she walked into the dark and spread the cloth on the tall grass to dry. When she came back, Pa said, "Wolves, half a mile away at Judge. Well, where there's deer, there will be wolves. I wish—" He didn't say what he wished, but Laura knew he wished Jack was there. When wolves howled in the big woods, Laura had always known that Jack would not let them hurt her. A lump swelled hard in her throat and her nose smarted. She winked fast and did not cry. That wolf, or perhaps another wolf, howled again. "Bedtime for little girls," Ma said cheerfully. Mary got up and turned around so that Ma could unbutton her, but Laura jumped up and stood still. She saw something deep in the dark beyond the firelight. Two green lights were shining near the ground. They were eyes. Cold ran up Laura's backbone. Her scalp crinkled, her hair stood up. The green lights moved. One winked, and the other winked out. Then both shone steadily, coming nearer. Very rapidly they were coming nearer. "Look, Pa, look," Laura said. "A wolf." Pa did not seem to move quickly, but he did. In an instant he took his gun out of the wagon and was ready to fire at those green lights. The eyes stopped coming. They were still in the dark, looking at him. "It can't be a wolf unless it's a mad wolf," Pa said. Ma lifted Mary into the wagon. "And it's not that," said Pa. "Listen to the horses." Bets and Patty were still biting off bits of grass. "A lynx," said Ma. "Or a coyote?" Pa picked up a stick of wood. He shouted and threw it. The green eyes went close to the ground, as if the animal crouched to spring. Pa held the gun ready. The creature did not move. "Don't, Charles," Ma said, but Pa slowly walked towards those eyes, and slowly along the ground the eyes crawled towards him. Laura could see the animal in the edge of the dark. It was a tawny animal and brindled. Then Pa shouted and Laura screamed. The next thing she knew, she was trying to hug a jumping, panting, wiggling Jack, who lapped her face and hands with his warm, wet tongue. She couldn't hold him. He leaped and wiggled from her to Pa to Ma and back to her. "Well, I'm beat," Pa said. "So am I," said Ma. But did you have to wake the baby? She rocked Carrie in her arms, hushing her. Jack was perfectly well, but as soon as he lay close to Laura and sighed a deep, long sigh, his eyes were red with tiredness, and all the underparts of him was caked with mud. Ma gave him a cornmeal cake and he licked it and wagged politely, but he could not eat. He was too tired. I'm so glad we continued reading and got to this chapter because I really forgot. Like, I knew something happened to the dog in the beginning when they introduced it, but I forgot he came back. Okay. No telling how long he kept swimming, Pa said, nor how far he was carried downstream before he landed. And when at last he reached them, Laura called him a wolf, and Pa threatened to shoot him. But Jack knew they didn't mean it. Laura asked him, "You knew we didn't mean it, didn't you, Jack?" Jack wagged his stump of a tail. He knew. It was past bedtime. Pa chained Pets and Patty to the feed box at the back of the wagon and fed them their corn. Carrie slept again, and Ma helped Mary and Laura undress. She put their long nightgowns over their heads while they stuck their arms into the sleeves. They buttoned the neckbands themselves and tied the strings of their nightcaps beneath their chins. Under the wagon, Jack wearily turned around 3 times and lay down to sleep. In the wagon, Laura and Mary said their prayers and crawled into their little beds. Ma kissed them good night. On the other side of the canvas, Pet and Patty were eating their corn. When Patty whooshed into the feed box, the whoosh was right at Laura's ear. There were little scurrying sounds in the grass. In the trees by the creek, an owl called, "Hoo, hoo." Farther away, another owl answered, "Hoo, hoo." Far away on the prairie, the wolves howled, and under the wagon, Jack growled low in his chest. In the wagon, everything was safe and snug. Thickly in front of the wagon, thickly in front of the open wagon top hung the large glittering stars. Pa could reach them, Laura thought. She wished he would pick the largest one from the thread on which it hung from the sky and give it to her. She was wide awake. She was not sleepy at all. But suddenly, she was very much surprised. The large star winked at her. Then she was waking up next morning. Well, looks like you're fast asleep, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it